If you missed it live, catch the podcast on kaya959.co.za.
Paul Zimnisky, an independent diamond analyst, joins us now on the show to give us some perspective on this particular deal and, of course, what it means for both the mining house, the government, and for the metal itself. As we know, diamonds being a very key commodity, not just for jewelry, but, of course, an industrial one, as it is used in key mining equipment and industrial equipment as a cutting tool. Paul, good to have you with us, and thank you so much for your time, sir.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. I guess first things first, you've been in the mining industry for quite some time and primarily focused on diamonds. What do you make of this particular agreement, and does it come as much of a surprise?
Yeah, they've been working on this agreement for a few years now, so I think they've had time to fully talk it through and sort things out, and it seems like both parties are satisfied with the agreement. And I think as far as the changes, I think it was roughly in line with at least what I was expecting. I think the big takeaway here is there's really no change in the profit or the revenue split. The change has more to do with who has control over the diamond sales, and the government of Botswana going forward is going to have the right to sell more diamonds independently. So the government taking a more active role in the relationship. That's the big takeaway here.
Got you. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we also know that obviously gives the country of Botswana another aspect of creating revenue for themselves by accessing the diamond market and selling them. But talk to us about these markets, right? Because we're well aware that there's a lot of concerns about governance, blood diamonds, and making sure that when these diamonds get sold, beneficiated, processed, and then into a particular market, that there's an ethical track record that needs to be maintained. Unpack the market dynamics for us, and if Botswana as a government does have access to these spaces.
Right, and I think that's what's so important about the relationship with Botswana and De Beers. That joint venture is probably the most important in the industry. They've been the leaders as far as improving the supply chain transparency of the diamond industry. Currently, the entities are really implementing technology and using technology in new ways that is allowing us to track a diamond all the way through the mining process, the cutting and the polishing process, and all the way to the jewelry counter, so the consumer knows what the source of the diamond is. And I think, if you look at De Beers and the government of Botswana together, we're talking about a third of global diamond supply. So that's a significant part of the market. And I think continuing to see the two parties work together with a mutual goal of increasing supply chain transparency is a very important step for the larger global diamond industry.
Let's talk skills. And I think this is a very interesting one. I've heard of stories from my parents back in the day about diamond traders and those who were actually taught to polish diamonds and artisanal skills that are required in that space. How could Botswana benefit here within that particular space, perhaps to continue processing and beneficiating some of these diamonds locally to sell them to a market where they might be already complete?
Yeah, I think that's the key. I think the government's looking for ways to extend the supply chain beyond mining to create more jobs, to create different types of jobs. And, we've certainly seen more and more of that over the last, 10, 20 years. There's now a significant amount of the diamonds that are mined in Botswana are cut and polished in Botswana. They're traded in Botswana. De Beers' primary sorting and selling facility through their site holder system, that's based in Botswana. So there's been a significant shift to the country of origin, with regard to moving up the supply chain. And I think, in terms of this most recent agreement, I think, we kind of continue to be on that track to see more beneficiation, with the producing countries.
100%. On that note, what I'm keen to also get your observations on is, I guess, the cycles within the diamond market. I assume you've been monitoring this for quite some time, and you've witnessed dips, you've witnessed increased demand, you've witnessed political volatility that impacts the dynamics. But what would you say the last few years have held, and what opportunities might be able to be explored by a country like Botswana and even their peers like Russia within the diamond industry?
Yeah, well, again, I think when you look at the agreement that we just saw come, to at least a informal conclusion, I think the agreement's going to finally be formalized at the end of the calendar year. But again, the point being is that we are going to see more transparency with regard to the upstream segment of the industry. The government of Botswana sells its portion of diamonds through auction. and they publicly share the data of the results, from those auctions. So, this will lead to more price transparency. However, I think when you look at, say, the auction and the tender model of selling diamonds versus the contract model, which is the way that De Beers historically sells, it does lead to more price volatility if we're looking at the auction market. Prices will reflect, current conditions, much more so than a longer-term contract sales approach. So there are, puts and takes. There's some positives, some negatives, I think, with regard to the way that this is going to impact the market.
100%. I'm aware that you focus primarily on diamonds through your company, Diamond Analytics, but I'm keen just if we can reflect on, I guess, that the mining structure and these kind of agreements, if this might set a precedent to be something of the norm within mining houses, primarily on the African continent.
Yeah, I think if you look at just global mining in general, I think the relationship between De Beers and Botswana is one of the best in the whole mining industry. It goes back 50 plus years, and I think there's a reason. And it's, I think, because both parties have benefited. I think it's been a fair relationship. I think both parties respect each other. And I guess the other thing I wanted to bring up is that with this new agreement, one of the results is there's going to be an initiation of a diamond development fund for the government of Botswana. So it's going to be a sovereign wealth fund of sorts. You've seen this with, oil and gas producing countries, where they are basically taking money today and putting it aside for tomorrow. And I think the goal of this fund is to build it to $750 million over the next 10 years. So I think that's a great move, and I think that's a smart way to proceed.
100%. Paul, we're looking forward to seeing how this does develop and, of course, unfold. Really sounds like an exciting initiative, and really appreciative of your independent insight that you've shared with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's Paul Zimnisky, who's an independent diamond analyst, giving us some feedback on the deal that's been struck between De Beers as well as the government of Botswana. They're basically giving them access not only to ensure that they're able to extract these resources out of the ground, but saying, hey, give us 50% access to the markets that we can also sell and benefit from the selling of these diamonds, which is a critical development that Paul has highlighted for us.
If you missed it live, catch the podcast on kaya959.co.za.